Good morning. I will call to order the regular meeting of our Zoning and Planning Committee. Today is February 18th, 2016. I'm Lisa Bender. I chair the committee. We have a quorum today with Council Members Reich, Goodman, Andrew Johnson, and Council President Johnson. So we are ready to do the committee's business. We have just 2 items on our agenda today. We'll start with the consent agenda, which is item number 2, which is appointments to our Minneapolis Arts Commission. I won't read through each of the folks who are listed here, but I will say that we so appreciate the people who take the time to volunteer and serve on each of our boards and commissions. And the Minneapolis Arts Commission has been really active lately. They were really involved in Councilmember Reich and Glidden's work last year to get dedicated funding for the arts and to look at how we're allocating those funds. So we're really appreciative of the 8 people here who we are appointing for terms that go through actually a variety of dates here that are all each listed in detail on the agenda. So I will move item number 2. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in approval, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. So then we'll return to item number 1, which is notice for a public hearing. We will start with a staff presentation. This is an interim use permit for a principal parking facility at 718 West Broadway Avenue. Good morning, Ms. Smith.
Good morning, Chair Bender and committee members. The subject site that we are looking at today is at 718 West Broadway. The subject site is located at the northeast corner of Aldrich Avenue North and West Broadway in the Hawthorne neighborhood in Ward 5. It is located within a major retail center and also along a commercial corridor, which is West Broadway. There are a range of commercial and residential uses in the area, including a liquor store, retail, a bank, grocery store, and there are a number of surface parking lots in the area. The site itself is about 33,000 square feet in size. It has been vacant since 2006, and it most recently held a drive-through restaurant, which was demolished in 2006. The Sanctuary Covenant Church is the applicant for this proposal, and the proposal is to use the site as an interim, as a principal parking facility on an interim basis for up to 5 years. That's what they've requested. Staff is recommending 3 years, which I will explain later in the presentation. The church also owns the property to the north, and they have recently received approvals from the Planning Commission in January in order to build an addition to the existing 2-story building, and they would be using that site as the church. The northern part of the site is zoned OR2. It does not have any off-site parking, so they're exploring other parking opportunities within the area, including agreements with other tenants and business owners throughout the area, and also this site for temporary parking. Here's a view of the site from Broadway, which is the photo on the north, or on the top part of the page, and then from Aldrich. So the site currently has 2 curb cuts. The zoning for the site is C3S and the West Broadway Overlay District. Surface parking lots are not allowed, or are allowed, as a conditional use in the C3S zoning district, and they're not expressly prohibited in the WB West Broadway Overlay District. Unlike the PO Overlay District, there's no limitation on the amount of parking lot frontage facing the public street, so it is actually not prohibited in WB, even though the whole district does emphasize minimum FAR, minimum floor area and stories. The site plan that the applicant has provided shows 50 parking spaces and 1 loading space. They would be leaving the remainder of the site along West Broadway for a possible future redevelopment. And the proposed parking facility would meet the minimum parking requirement for the church, which is 45 spaces. The applicant, as I have mentioned, also is intending to pursue additional parking agreements in the area. One little thing, the drive aisle dimensions exceed the minimum requirement of 22 feet. They're proposing a range of 24 to 26 feet in width, and so staff is recommending a condition that those be narrowed in order to limit impervious surfaces and increase the area available for future redevelopment along the south portion of the site. And the proposal would consolidate curb cuts, so they'd be removing 1 access point off of West Broadway. The landscape plan is relatively robust. The impervious surfaces would be reduced from 70% existing to 51%. The proposal does not comply with the minimum canopy tree screening or linear tree requirements in Chapter 530 site plan review, but given the temporary nature of the use, it would not be practical to require full compliance with these standards. So the interim use permit looks at the same 6 findings that are required for conditional use permit. In addition, there are 5 interim use conditions that must be met in order to recommend approval for this. One that I'd like to focus on is just the adopted city policies. So the site itself is identified as mixed use in the future land use map. As I mentioned, there are 2 land use features along this site, and it belongs to the West Broadway Alive Small Area Plan study area. And this small area plan identified this parcel as transit scale, which is the highest development intensity that was identified in the small area plan, and it allows for tall apartment buildings as shown in this picture. So given the articulated city policies which support a minimum 2-story commercial, residential, or mixed-use development on this site as being appropriate for this parcel, staff is recommending that the City Council limit the interim use request to no more than 3 years instead of the 5 requested by the applicant. And so here are the list of recommended conditions of approval, showing the date as being 3 years from the City Council action. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is also here.
I do have a question, which is, you touched on this, but could you talk more about what happens after the interim period is over? So they are not allowed to leave this permanently as parking in perpetuity. So what happens then if they've made this investment and we have the parking there after 3 or 5 years or whatever the period is?
Well, with these conditions, they would not be able to continue to use that parking lot, that site as a parking lot. So it could turn into an enforcement issue. They may have the option to apply for an extension to extend it an additional 2 years. They would have to go through the public hearing process again.
Are there any other questions for staff? There are not. So we will open the public hearing. We'll go ahead and start with the applicant, and then anyone else who would like to speak, please sign in with the clerk. Otherwise, we'll ask each of you to state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Tom Peterson with Station 19 Architects, applicant on behalf of Sanctuary Covenant Church. And our office is at 2001 University Avenue, the old historic fire station by the U of M. I live in St. Paul, 2017 Princeton, for those who care. To answer your question, the intent is eventually to build a building. So technically that interim use as a principal parking structure would turn into an accessory parking structure for that front building. And then there would be a shared use agreement formally for the church to use that as their parking, shared parking. It's all one property, so it's a little bit of kind of a split identity that they would own the entire parcel, so it's an agreement with themselves. But technically, because they're 2 zoning lots, it makes this an interesting dialogue. I've kind of put a plan here that shows, see if I can, I'm covering up my, so this shows kind of the footprint of a future building, which would be 4 stories, that meets the minimum FAR requirement of 33,000 square feet. And so we're leaving 76 or 78 feet between the south property line along Broadway and the edge of the curb for the parking. So the intent is to build that shared parking space kind of as a first step, and then add the building as partnership with the different community groups. And owner may speak to some of the partners that they're looking at or considering. We've Also kind of taking the time to run, and this is a little small for you, but taking time to run kind of the shared parking calcs for upper 3 stories being apartment with 100% discount for being along a transit line, discount of parking stalls, and then the required stalls for shared retail or office on the main floor. And that's where we arrived at our 50 stalls. The peak time, given some different scenarios, has parking requirements, on-site parking requirements shared between the church and that the other south building, as proposed, being between 49 and 53 stalls. That's with some reductions for transit stops and bicycles and the other things that make it the more livable city idea. So the 200 stalls that would be the maximum on-site parking that the zoning code allows has been reduced to 50 for the shared unit. And then, as Mei Ling had mentioned, that we're taking additional 5 stalls as a 10% reduction for some bicycle parking. So that would take it down to 45 as a minimum for the seating in the church at this time. And I think there's some discussions with the council member for that area about whether 50 or 45 is the right amount for there. And but our intent was to demonstrate that the parking that's going in now as a principal structure can't make sense under the zoning code and meets all the requirements as an accessory parking facility for the shared use in the future. And I know there's concern, as anybody, for developing and raising money and finding tenants for a building. And the church has been in the North Minneapolis community for 12, 13 years now, and has had some history of kind of development policies and is committed to building a building along West Broadway that really supports and encourages the neighborhood and the neighborhood businesses. So their first step is actually getting this approval to move forward, and then that steps in to the process of securing those partners and securing the funding to complete that. But we started out as looking for a conditional use permit and have shifted to an interim use, just to thinking it's a more appropriate device for approval in stepping into this. So hopefully that answers questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant? All right.
Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and have anyone else who'd like to speak come up and state your name and address for the record if you'd like to speak. Would anyone else like to speak? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Council President.
Madam Chair, I would like to move this forward without recommendation. And I know Councilmember Yang wants to continue to try and work on some of the parking issues. So that'll be my motion.
Okay, on the motion, is there any discussion? I'll just add, it's exciting to see this long-term vision for this corridor, which we're all very excited to see investment here. So, that's a great vision to see. So, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And that carries. That's our final item, and we are adjourned.